Being able to set styles and classes dynamically is super important, and you now learned how you can achieve this in React code. Now let's move to something else, and that would be the styling itself. Currently, we're using just CSS for that. Regular CSS files with regular selectors, mostly class selectors, but also sometimes combined with tag selectors, for example. We're importing these files into our component files, but as I emphasized multiple times, this does not result in those styles being scoped to this component only. So that means that if we had any other element anywhere else in the DOM that had a form control CSS class on it, this style, for example, would target it and would affect it. So it's not like we only care about form control elements in this component. No, every element on the entire page is affected because by default, those styles are not scoped. Now, that is not necessarily a problem. You can, of course, be careful about your selectors. You can use class selectors or ID selectors here. It is regular CSS after all. You can use any selector. And you can ensure that the IDs and the classes you are selecting are only used in the places where you want to apply the styling. But of course, especially in larger projects, potentially with a lot of developers working on the code, it could happen that a name is used twice. That form control, for example, is used in different parts of the application, and therefore, unfortunately, styles spill over to other components, and you might want to avoid this. And there are various ways of avoiding this, and I will show you the two most popular approaches, therefore. Approach number one is to use a package called styled components. And you can just search for styled components to find their official web page. Now on this page, you can learn all about styled components. Here I will only introduce you to the package. If you want to use it, you can dive way deeper into it with those docs, but I will give you a thorough introduction, no worries. Styled components is a package that helps you build, guess what, components which have certain styles attached to them, where the styles really only affect the components to which they were attached and not any other components. Now, to get started, we need to install that package. And here you see the command you need to run for that. Now, if you've never installed packages before, keep in mind that our project here already has a couple of packages on which it depends. For example, React. And we're just adding one more package here. For that, you should quit your development server with Ctrl-C and run npm install --save styled-components inside of this project folder. Now this will download this package and store it in the node modules folder, and thereafter you'll be able to use it in this project. So let's wait for this to finish. Yep, here it is. And with this finished, you can restart the server with npm start. So now how do we use this package? Of course, you can learn all about it on the official page, but I will simply introduce you to it step by step. Now let's pick a place where we do want to use it. And let's say we want to style our button. We actually already have a button component, but we really only created this button component, if we're honest, because we wanted to have some default styling for a button. Nothing wrong with this approach, but here we could also use the styled components package to achieve this in a bit of an easier way. Now, how would we do this? We could rebuild our button here by creating a new constant button. And now what we store in there is not a functional component, but instead we now import styled from styled-components. This import is now available since you installed the package. We can get rid of that button CSS import, and instead now we use styled.button, and then we add two backticks like this. Now that certainly is a super weird syntax, and chances are you haven't seen that before. This is called a tagged template, literal. It's a default JavaScript feature. It's not specific to this package, not specific to React. You could use it in any JavaScript project. And now what does this do? Well, button is simply a method on this styled object. Styled is an object we're importing from styled components, and there we can access the button method. It's just a special kind of method, you could say. Instead of being a method which you call like this, with parentheses, you add these strange backticks after it. And again, that's just a default JavaScript syntax which is supported by JavaScript. In the end, this will be executed as a method behind the scenes, and what you pass in here will be passed into this method just in a special way. If you want to learn more about this tagged template literal syntax, you find a link attached where you can learn more. Here, I don't want to waste your time, since we won't need to know the internals here to proceed. For the moment, we just need to know that what we pass between these two backticks will kind of end up in that button method. And this button method, and that's the interesting part, will return a new button component. Actually, that styled package has methods for all HTML elements. It has a P method for a paragraph, h1, h2, and so on for the h1, h2 tags, div to create a div, and so on. It's all there, and here we need the button. So this overall expression will return a button, but a button with the styles we provide between these two backticks. The cool thing about the backtick syntax is that you can write a multi-line string like this, so you can split this across multiple lines without any extra syntax. And now we can just copy all the button styles here and add them in here. We'll need to tweak them, but that is something we can do. Now, what do we need to do to make this work in the end? This will return a button, and this button won't have a class of button, because we have no place where we would set up this class name. So instead, the styles we pass between the opening and closing backtick will directly affect this button. You therefore get rid of any selectors like this, and instead just paste in your styles just like that. And they will be added to the button element, which is returned by this method call, which is then stored in this button constant. Now for pseudo selectors, you can use the ampersand symbol. That's supported by that styled component package. This tells the package that you want to have a special case, a special pseudo selector in this case here, for this component which is created here. So in this case, we're saying, hey, when this button here has focus, please apply this style. We can do the same here for hover. So and colon hover and colon active. And this should now give us a button which has these styles. Now the button which is returned also by default applies all the props you might be passing to your own button component, which we're exporting here in the end. So we can still add an on-click prop, we can still set the type. That will all be forwarded by the styled components package to that core built-in button, which we previously wrapped or used ourselves, which is now used internally by this button method. We can now get rid of the React import up there because we're not dealing with JSX in this file anymore. And if we now save this, we should see that our application looks and works exactly as it did before. So this still works, but this is now our styled button. Now we can tell that there is something different if we inspect it in the developer tools. Of course, it's a regular button. That's what this button method here in the end returns. But you see on that, there is a very strange class, two strange classes to be precise. And these are class names we certainly didn't set up. These are class names dynamically generated by the styled components package. Because what this package does in the end is it looks at the styles we set up here, and then it wraps these styles into generated class names, where it guarantees that every class name is unique so that it can't spill over to other components of the app. And it will then add these classes as global CSS. But now, since we have unique class names for every styled component, the styled setup here will never be able to affect another component in the app, because these unique class names are really, well, unique per styled component. So that's how the styling is applied here, and that's how styled components work. Now, of course, we can also use styled components when we want to set up something dynamic.